Martin, thanks very much for a really entertaining talk. It's been excellent. I'll just ask a question about 20-minute cities before we get on to the other topics that you've raised. Has there been a sleight of hand in the definition of 20-minute cities? Because I think originally it might have been, it was like basic facilities should be within a 20-minute walk, whereas as you described, it's now 20 minutes there and back. Now, is that because Edinburgh, for example, is already a 20-minute city? I don't think there's anywhere in Edinburgh that you can't get to a supermarket or a school or a doctor's within 20 minutes walking from your home. Certainly where I live in Leith, that's the case. So how they just subtly change the definition to say then something must be done because we're not all within 10 minutes of wherever?
Yes, I think we've seen it on various things where they just keep changing the names. Everything's on wheels and it's all just moving, and as soon as you try and lay a hand on it, it moves or it evaporates and turns into something else. So yeah, it's but different communities have to, depending on where you're living, you've got facilities right near you and people are traveling for half an hour to come to your facilities for certain things, and it's totally organic. So it's just the whole thing is such a just a made up idea. It doesn't make sense house by house, because if you live in the middle of one of the 20-minute neighbourhoods, 20 minutes takes you into 3 other neighbourhoods, and you're on a border of a neighbourhood. So are you supposed to not go into that 20-minute neighbourhood? Why give these neighbourhoods a name? But there's no boundary drawn, because the poor sod who probably had the map thought, where the hell am I going to draw this boundary? And if it goes through somebody's living room, is some people going to be in different neighbourhoods? It's just nonsense, The missus sleeps in Morningside and I'm in Wrestlerig.
Thank you very much for your talk. I think it would be really interesting to start doing some freedom of information requests to Edinburgh City Council on what are the estimated costs that would occur for the technology, the energy used, etc., for these 20-minute cities, and also the economic costs, as you said, not being able to go to a particular restaurant or a health club or something of that nature. So that was my first question. That's my first question about, do you think that's worthwhile doing some freedom of information requests? It may not be the right time, but the other one is about fossil fuels, and it also reflects on the new energy systems. The model we have at the moment is just as much a problem, because if you look at the costs between, I think the term is between the well and the wheel of oil, there's masses and masses of losses of energy and money. So if you look at it in 2 lots, and yet they're telling us to insulate our houses. That's a bit like locking the stable once the horse is bolted. Yeah. So from that point of view, the system's wrong. Whereas if you look how they're doing it in Denmark, there's a fantastic map on the internet that shows, to begin with, they had wind farms that were a spoke and wheel model, but now they've got it the opposite way around. They have natural grids or energy hubs in little locations where the community have control over the energy they use and the price they set, and then put the rest of it up to the national grid, and they can buy from the national grid as well if they run short. So I think there are these systems out there. However, there's a lack of willingness to be able. So I think the oil and fossil fuel system is wrong in the first place, because it's a spoke and hub or energy and hub system, and not creating the energy local about whatever is the best resource you have locally. So I don't know what your comments are on those 2 questions. A bit rambling, I'm sorry.
I mean, the freedom of information requests, like Ian Jarvis, who's been looking into the 5G, they have a very dynamic group, and for the life of them, they've been unable to find out what various installations cost and who pays for it. and how much power they use. And you'd think, well, that's got to be simple. It hasn't been. Much debate. And I think local control, where communities receive money, receive electricity, and they arrange themselves optimal for their situation, which is different, as Patrick Geddes was explaining. Look at the individual, their sovereignty, look at the household, the street, and you may have to adjust your thinking halfway down the same street. It's not homogeny. None of us are the same, and it's always changing. So the oil thing, the oil was interesting because the fuel no longer stores. Oh, wait a minute, I thought we were running out of fuel. Well, let's at least make sure when you put it in a can, if you go back to that can in 10 years, you can still use it. No, you can't. You leave that in a strimmer, and the seals and everything in the diaphragms, they're rotten because of the additives in the fuel. Wait a minute, so fuel doesn't keep? I thought it was rare. I thought it used to keep. You used to be able to leave fuel in a tractor. You could leave it all winter, go in on the start of the season, and it would start. So we could use fuel better than we do. A friend of mine who was an Audi engineer, they were in the process of getting ready to develop a 200 miles per gallon carburetor. And Audi was told, right turn, Clyde, we're going artificial intelligence and electronics. And they were like, wait a minute, we want to keep going with the evolution of our petrochemical, of our fueled cars. We've got a long way to go in our evolution of our engineering. We've got all these plans and all these ideas. Stop right there, we're going electric. And if you're not interested, you retire, because we've got universities full of new indoctrinates that will come in here and do what we want them to do. So they all left. Amazing people with grey hair used to set up all the cars for Top Gear. They left. But they could have done so much more. But there's no one answer. So each community, with some freedom of information, looking at the resources and the needs in your community. Some communities may have access to solar, but the solar doesn't, the materials don't keep. And we go, well, that's somebody else's problem. Well, let's not do that.
Come in on that, because the gentleman I had here at the last meeting, that's his speciality, and they have got a system, and it doesn't need government funding, for local energy hubs. It's called the Natural Grid. And can they get accepted in Scotland? And his business partner's just flown out to the South Pacific, and they're doing it in an island out there called Niue, and then Fiji, and Chris goes at the end of the month. So there is a way of funding it that doesn't need the government, but it makes us self-sufficient. And of course, everything you've pointed to in your presentation is about control, not about self-sufficiency. So I'll just leave it at that.
No, well, I'll go then. Martin, I noticed the 20-minute agenda claimed to have ending poverty as one of its goals. I don't understand the connection. Not to you.
No, it's a popular idea, so throw it in.
Yeah, so
It might even
how
cure
is it
obesity.
meant to do that?
No bloody cars. You watch out for the potholes. You could drown in one of them. You better make sure you can swim.
Any explanation for how this agenda...
No, I mean, equity is, it's going to be better for equity. What, we're all going to be poor together? Okay, I suppose that's equity. If you end poverty where there's no poverty because we're all poor, I suppose that could make sense. So it's such sleight of hand, such sleight of hand. It's like a confidence game. I've said this to all these businesses that I've spoke to, and I said it's like somebody shoplifting. They're going out the door with your telly, and you're thinking, you're not really going out the door with the telly, are you? Yeah. And then you challenge them, and they go, are you sexist? He's like, what? You're stealing the telly. What's it got to do with sex? So it's all sleight of hand and bluff and bluster. So all of these terms, you drill into it, and there's no substance there, and you're thinking, wow, it's in a really big book, and it's been repeated in these documents, but it's just froth. But in amongst that froth is absolutely solid, odious seeds of policy that once endorsed, oh, that's you. They're in there, but damn if you can find them. And just trying to get past frothy words that are actually of no substance. They're just in there as some sort of salad dressing. I don't know.
End poverty, then. That is part of it, then. You think, well,
who could argue
who doesn't
with that?
Want to end poverty?
Who doesn't want to end poverty?
Okay, well, thank you for that.
You summarised at the beginning kind of the mindset of the people putting forward these ideas, coming off of the end poverty point, that, there are too many people on the planet, and that our economies and our activities need to be reduced, which would be one way of solving poverty, because if there were fewer people, there'd be more stuff to go around, so that would help. But what concerns me is that how is it that so many people in these positions of authority and influence have been convinced to act ultimately against their own interest? Are there any promises that where we get to afterwards, you'll definitely be included? Because it seems like people have been, because I get it, right? Because it's very emotive, because it's like, oh, we're going to save the planet, climate crisis, depopulation, extinction events. Like, people are very emotive about it, and they're very enthusiastic, and they're like, this is for equity, like you said. We're going to make life in the world more just. But what they're being encouraged to do, having like sparked that emotion, what they're then being encouraged to do is against their own interests. And I'm struggling. How has that happened? That so many people.
It might be a couple of things. One of them is almost like a class system where we don't mean you, we mean all them, the unwashed, the stupid people, the ones who go to Ladbrokes, the ones who go to Asda, the ones who do all the fighting and dying in the trenches. That lot, not you. You're priest class, so it doesn't count. You've got 8 kids with 3 different wives. Don't worry, it's fine. You've got 7 cars. Your cars are wonderful. I mean, your Mazda. Oh, all of that. I don't mean you. So they are in a different class where it doesn't really count. But then you've also got all your qualifications and grades and your associateships and your professorships are all based on the right answer to the question and your political alliance and alignments. These are political appointments above a certain pleb level. It's basically political. So you're going nowhere. You're not getting that house. You're not getting that holiday. So once you're into it, it's kind of, well, if you really push these people really hard and thumbscrew them, they'll say, it's just the way it is. There's you and there's me. We're not the same. And you think, wow, but you've got to push them a long way, I think, before you'll get that level of honesty from them. And it's a psychologist's question, really. But I don't know if these people are truly comfortable with what they're doing and saying. They seem to be like a confidence game. The thief knows he's stealing the telly, he's going out the shop. But he's blustering large if you try and stop him. He knows it's a crime. Do you realise it's a crime to steal that telly? Duh! Of course I know it's a crime. But how can you do it? It's a crime. How can you support a policy like that? You know it's not right. I know, but I'm really well paid and it doesn't affect me anyway. I'll get a new Maserati that goes through the low emission zone. And you think, wow.
And I guess it sets up the incentive structures as well to try to be in that class, right? Because if you can see, well, there's going to be some stay after this, and I want to be on the side of the people who are getting the good stuff. So
but I do think the silent majority keep their own counsel wisely, and they know a lot more than most people would give them credit for. And I'm sure that will be true at the levels of people in so-called leadership or senior positions. There will be people there, but they are very watched. It's logical that they would be. But I don't think we're on our own in this, and I'm sure there's people there, but we haven't seen much of them. And all these policies and hundreds more, they're just coming like flies, and they just keep changing the name. We just start chasing them down and reading the books, and they change the name. It's a hell of a scrap, and it's a steamroller, and we don't seem to have stopped it yet. And we're going to have to get people who are senior, or people into senior positions, to stop this steamroller. But somehow I think it's being driven the rocks deliberately, and it's going to crash. It's like lying. It's exhausting. It costs a fortune to tell a lie, and over time it becomes exponential. I don't think they can afford the wiring and all the surveillance that it's going to take to pull this off, because they didn't manage to kill enough of us, perhaps. There's too many of us to control, maybe.
A couple of weeks ago, I came across an old film. It was the on Cambuslang, the new town of Cambuslang. Cumbernauld, yeah. I've obviously got too much time on my hand watching things like that. And it was basically covering the first phase of that new town. And they came up with an interesting statement because they were talking about the central part of the town, sort of thing, where everything was going to be located. And they said that every neighbourhood or section of the town would be a 20-minute walk from their house, no more than a 20-minute walk. So this film was made about 1967, 68 sort of thing. So I was just wondering what your views on that were.
Well, there was always a lot of on the edge of social engineering taught in the planning about new towns, housing estates, and of course some ideas are sensible. Let's have end poverty, great idea. Let's have equity, great idea, but still have freedom. So make it possible that there's a dentist within 4 hours of where you live. That'd be a good idea, or closer in shops. So all of that infrastructure is no-brainerish, but then that gets leveraged like a stock market deal to do something else. So in the town planning courses, it was always about pluralism, gathering together many considerations, and then it was supposed to be a design course, planning, because Patrick Geddes was a designer. It's not a policy course, but it's become a policy profession rather than a design profession, because it was meant to be people, because I'm a designer, landscape architecture first and foremost, and it was originally planning was supposed to be like that, but with a broader brush, where you looked at an individual street, neighbourhood, its issues and its opportunities, and you designed something to bring it its potential, and make sure that basic human rights or sensible ideas, what would be a certain distance for people to walk that would be fair and reasonable. Around about 20 minutes would be a reasonable fabric to create, but it wasn't meant to be controlled, and it wasn't meant to be surveilled. And all the money and effort that's gone into these policies could have fixed potholes, care homes, carers. It could have done all sorts of amazing things. You could have built some garages to put new filters on old cars and let them run another 200,000 miles. You could have done all sorts. Heriot-Watt University could have an engineering place where they see how many hundreds of thousands of miles they can get out of Edinburgh's cars running clean. They could have done that. Fortunes have been spent. So I think good ideas have been leveraged to bad ends. But on the first hearing of it, on the courses, it all sounds pretty darn good. And then you see the end result, like Corbusier, these big high-rise flats. Nobody wants to live 18 floors up. These are cities in the sky. What a load of horseshit. But people bought it. Architects built them, and then later on said that was a bad phase that we had in the 60s and 70s where we built those horrors. Let's bring them all down. And people were fighting them then. They couldn't stop them, so they got built and then they got demolished. What a bloody waste. You know, so there's always been sensible people, but they're never in charge.
Just an observation, right? I think it's, I don't know, I've been thinking about this quite a lot. There's a difference between truth and reality. And most people don't understand this, right? Truth is just the truth with no emotion involved. Reality involves emotions and beliefs. And everybody in this room has a different reality because we've all got a different personal history. But in this group that meet on a regular basis, there's another saying is, you get what you repeat, right? And so what I'm kind of seeing now that I'm out of this group quite a lot and I'm kind of mixing around is that when you get involved in a group and you get one side of the scale, what happens is you form the same beliefs and values, and then confirmation bias comes in. So you pick and you choose all the facts that you want to build your picture, right? But in actual fact, if you look at scientists will come out with one theory for 1 minute, right? And then the next minute, another scientist will come out with opposing views. Who's right? It depends what point of view you look at, right? Now, the truth is, there are people out there who are planning to do what you said they're doing, right? But in my reality, moving about, ordinary people and seeing what's happening, they're struggling. Because people worry about vaccinations. I go to the gym and I have this working class pigeon shop. There's nobody believes in vaccinations now. Everybody's either been injured or knows somebody who's been injured. So that's gone, right? couple of videos up there, to me, is where the clue is, with the ULEZ cameras coming down. I don't think the 15-minute cities will ever be implemented because I don't think it's feasible. People aren't going to stay in a 20-minute thing, right? But there is some truths that we have to accept. Scotland's finished. Europe's finished. It's finished. It's gone. 20, 30, 40 years from now, we will be in the minority. Our culture will be gone. It's unstoppable. And where I come from, Craigmillar, which is a working class area, and I don't know where you're staying, Martin, but come down
I used
here.
to live in Wester Hales.
Right, Wester Hales. Well,
Not-
I don't know
not
what's
quite
like
as
in
bad as
Wester
yours,
Hales,
but
but what
close.
I'm trying to say to you is, right, what I'm trying to say to you is the demographics are changing that fast. I see it changing. Every time I go up the road every week, I see it changing every week. I go to the gym, I see all the different cultures come into the gym, I see it. There's some really nice people in there, but no doubt we're going to get the negative stuff like you do down south. It's all coming, right? So there has to be a point where you have to accept some of the changes that's coming, because there is going to be big changes. But I also have the faith that this full-tilted dystopian future and the 20-minute cities and all the things that we're talking about, they're not going to happen. Because if you look at what happened with the vaccinations, right? The vaccinations, 5 million people refused it, then it was 12 million, then it was 20 million. So they dropped that, they dropped the lockdowns, they tried the vaccination passport, they dropped that. It was meant to come again in Scotland in December. Where is that gone? Not a word on it, right? So I know that they are struggling, and I don't actually believe that this 20-minute city is going to have the full tilt. And so really my kind of question to you is there anything that you kind of accept? Like, for example, you spoke about the Enlightenment and the stuff that happened in the past with Scotland. Do you accept that there isn't going to be a Scotland in 30, 40 years?
No, I do feel hopeful, because I feel it in my heart, and sometimes you can't put it to words. What you feel inside is beyond your heart and mind.
But do you actually accept the fact that we are going to be in the minority in 30, 40 years from now?
What do you mean by us in the minority?
White people are going to be in the minority in Scotland. So Scottish people are going to be in the minority. That's the facts.
Well, perhaps. But there's a thing with people that they love their roots. And if you are free, most people who are free want to be themselves,
right?
Ultimately, and they also want to reconnect with their roots. So people who have been encouraged or forced to migrate, if that's...
But the point I'm trying to make is, we can always kind of like connect with our roots, but we're not going to be in power in our own country. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, the bit that
we already have an Asian First Minister, we have an Asian Prime Minister, we've also got another Asian in Ireland. Our culture's going to disappear. Maybe when we get together in pubs, if they're still there and we get together, we can keep it going. But our culture as a dominant force is going to be gone, and we're going to have other cultures and rules imposed upon us.
Well, there's certainly a lot of that going on, which impoverishes cultures. People don't talk about this. There are parts of the world losing millions of their strongest and their brightest young people, being pushed to different parts of the world at vast expense, unlimited expense for unlimited travel. Well, we're told to limit our travel, and there's no money for us, and yet there's money for that. I think that will boomerang at some point, where these people will want to go back to their roots and culture. There'll be a certain amount want to be here, but I think...
we won't have a culture. That's the point I'm trying to make. We won't have a culture.
Well, we form it in our communities where people... they are where they want to be, and they invest in their communities, and there are lots of people with lots of ideas, should they only get an opportunity to express them, who could start to help life flourish very quickly. If you give people freedom from all sorts of regulation, things can happen like Singapore. It just went boom as soon as they freed up the economy. It just took off. America took off as soon as they took the foot of regulation off the neck of America. Its economy went boom. It went crash again, once the boot came back on. But I think if we get our freedom from some of these tyrannical policies, we will flourish, and you'll be surprised.
Well, I think we will get our freedom. I think it's just going to happen naturally with the kickback. I don't have any worry about that. But the point I'm trying to make is, if our culture aren't in key positions in politics, in fact, we're still the majority, right, but already we're becoming second-class citizens in our country. What happens when the other cultures take over? Say, for example, Islam becomes popular, right, and they get all the key powers in politics. For example, if you take our First Minister, his loyalties are with Islam, I know it's Scotland, right? So if we don't have the levers, or we're in places of power, we're not going to have that ability to make these decisions. So the point I'm trying to make is the only way I believe that you can actually get out of this in the future is that you start focusing on trying to create something now instead of running this stuff over and over and over and over, because I think that disempowers us. I really do. I think we are playing into their hands by running this stuff over and over and over in our minds all the time, where we should be going out there and actually make an impact on something that we can actually make an impact on.
But a lot of people do not know that there is an agenda. A lot of people think the idea of a 20-minute neighbourhood is good, so they're embracing it. So if people don't know what the agenda is, they can't spot items that are stepping towards it.
But you see,
they just can't.
But my experience, again, the things that have fell apart, like the vaccinations, the passport, etc., right? Watching the stuff on ULEZ and that, I would probably guess that a huge number of these people don't even know the agenda. They just know, they're just backed to a point where they won't go forward. And I actually don't think I don't believe everybody's going to be awake, and I don't think everybody needs to be awake, because I just think there's going to be a natural backlash.
Well, I hope that's the case.
I'd just like to add something to that, because you mentioned, Martin, that oh, sorry, I didn't think it was working that well, but it's maybe just my... Oh, right. Sorry, so I better talk a little bit louder. I sort of agree with what Brian's saying, and one of the things you said was the way to change it is get people in power. But I've got a feeling this was Donella Meadows, who you probably know from Limits to Growth, and she was involved in the Club of Rome. And I can't remember the other lady's name. Donella Meadows died quite young, but the other lady I've done some large-scale facilitation for. She's an American Scottish Jew. And their idea is that you can't change a dying system. Every system has a lifespan, and everything will die and be, regained. So you create a new system out with the old, and you start building that. And I think that's what Brian was trying to say. And then people will come, because you can only hospice a dying system, because our system is dying. It is breaking up. And I think there's some videos on this, if anybody's interested. It's called Two-Loop Change. And there's a nice new set of videos on how this works. So I don't think it's about getting people in those positions of power, because the system is so broken. You can't mend it. You need to create a new system.
Well, somebody needs to be making some decisions about orchestrating various industries, services, infrastructure, decisions on spending of which project this year, which project next year, and individual communities at some point come to that. This is a room of conversation. This is a room of thinkers, of truth seekers, or whatever. And I think I feel that we are all very much connected. And what we sort of light bulb, other people, it switches on with them as we're thinking. So this is worthwhile, and even our ponderings about what we're not sure about is worthwhile. And we say that when we're speaking, we're thinking out loud, and we're thinking, is that right? So these are all good questions, and our search engines are running in the background thinking, how do we resolve that? And that is a great activity. It's very noble. And I think that we have tremendous potential. And I think we are breaking out of this, and people are catching on to things. But it's very, very important for us to know the lies that we've been told, so that we don't fall for it again. It's very important for us to know the ultimate agenda, however silly and ridiculously outlandish it seems, because then we can spot the steps towards it, and we can spot if any new steps are being taken towards it again. And sometimes our resistance is very, very small things. But the power of small things is never to be overlooked, and the power of the individual. And it all sounds very twee, but yet we know it's true. And I think sometimes big things are blunt, small things are sharp. And, something that you say no, and you don't change your vehicle, you don't put a mask on, you don't do what you're being asked to do. They're little things, little dominoes tip bigger ones. And in natural systems that I see in my work, there's nothing happening and then there's a landslide. There's nothing happening and then there's just this sea of growth from nowhere. How did that happen? And we are like that. So I think we're here sowing seeds and talking about things and pondering issues that are real. But I think we have to not overlook the power that's in us. that we then connect with worldly blah, 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 blah. But then on a subtle level, things happen inside of us and in our lives that then makes a real difference. And it's highly infectious. Good ideas and the truth is highly infectious because it's effortless. It spreads just so easily, and because it wants to grow. It's like all of the plants. They want to grow. They work with us. This is a friendship with the nature. We don't have to fight with the nature. It wants to help us. So I think all of these gatherings have unusual fruit, and it's not always maybe what we think it is.
I agree with that.
And going back, Martin, to the power of persuasion, the two ladies that spoke at the council at Colchester seemed to me presented, very strong arguments. And I'm just wondering what happened to at the meeting afterwards. Did the councillors go along with it? Or
I think the councillors were bashed in and bewildered because they've had coffee mornings and been handed the books that they've signed and the documents that they've signed, and these electric bikes that they bought are so shiny. I mean, what would be the problem? Anyway, I've got shopping this afternoon. So they really didn't dig deep. They've done jobs where they've read very lightly, and I think they were completely bewildered. And a lot of them will be hoping the whole thing just goes away and these girls get tired.
What actually happened there? Like, did some of the councillors say, "I've just realised that I didn't think about this, and really
I think the councillors have been trying to hide from them, and I think they've been trying to pursue them. Much as councillors and various people in the room here have spoken to councillors, they don't want to know.
Yeah.
They generally scuttle away or they push back and then come voting. Yeah.
Just the Colchester Council. Just a comment on the council, what they did. Colchester Council agreed to have a debate. So they will invite these climate specialists and they will have a debate. But then you had Stockport Council, and they were like completely, didn't want to know. They were completely brainwashed and only thinking about their green initiative and everything. So it did have an effect in Colchester. It just depends on the people in the council if they're open to it or not. I don't know if it's got to do with money or just brainwashing.
Early stages, perhaps, of a change. It looks better in some places than others. I mean, Oxford, people get tired, and they know that. So they can wait us out.
I mean, I happen to recognise the two girls from something that they've created. So I don't know if it's started before or after, but they've created something called Colchester Council Watch, which is a YouTube channel. So I've just double checked it, and it is a YouTube channel. And the first girl is trying to, she's on a campaign to encourage people in all 380 plus councils around the country to all create their own YouTube channel called, in Edinburgh it would be called Edinburgh Council Watch. And what they do is they basically, they go through the boring task of watching all the council meetings, which are all published online, and they basically cut and paste them into shorter videos, which are accessible to the general public, and then they publish them on their YouTube channel, and then they let everyone know in Colchester about, Colchester Council Watch, and like I say, it's something that that she's proactively trying to encourage people to do all over the country. So,
brilliant.
If that's useful.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Alternatively, like we do with, what's your name, Mark? We should make leaflets, and then we distribute the leaflets so everybody knows about it. And then when we have a kind of les or ULEZ or whatever, we get with some paint and we take it off. And we carry on like that to show our opposition. Because talking to the council, they just don't want to know. It's going to take ages. They're going to do it behind our back or not do it. So, distributing leaflets is very powerful. When we do this for the 5G, people really get educated.
people really start to understand what it's all about. That would be a first step. And second, whatever they do to cut the street, to create the zone, we demolish it, period.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
Hiya, thanks. I just wanted to say thank you. My first time here, and this is great. This is fantastic. And so I'll be back. But and it just makes me feel good because, you know, I've gone over all that stuff, but I just feel like I was the guy with the tinfoil hat and, you know, my wife going, what are you going on about? But, and I would just say, I had a bunch of experience saving a building in town a few years ago, and we spent about 2 years dealing with the council. And they have to, it has to be, if they don't look good, you're not going to get them. So with us, we really realized when we won, the night we won our campaign, the next morning, an unnamed councillor was in front of the building at 6 a.m. videotaping how happy he was that we had won. And it's kind of an obvious thing, but that's what they're looking for, you know? You somehow have to get, you have to get it so that it's good for them. At the moment, it's not good for them, you know, so that's all, but great. Thank you, guys. I'm going to go home now.
It's sometimes about the individual. You know, the individual at the planning department, you can appeal to them as an individual. And sometimes you can nuance what you're saying or what you're promoting or what you're designing to them. And it can make a difference. But this is the human contact element where it's really boils down to between people, and you want to try and get around the policy and be talking to people. But we need more people involved in their community councils. It's exhausting. I've been involved in ours, but that's where a lot of the cut and thrust takes place, and you get to know somebody, and you can have some social time with them, and sometimes soften them a little bit to you as a person, because it starts off adversarial. But a lot of community councils have folded. And so access to people of influence has disappeared with that. And it's the first tier of governance is your local community council. And, you know, some of them are very big and they've got chains and everything. And, you know, they get elected and they get lots of tea and coffee and stuff. And others, it's the 4 of you in a village hall just talking about dog poo bags in the trees, you know. But it's at that coalface where it kind of starts. But for me, the frustration has been hearing far too much conversation about 150 different policies, looking at the merits of those individual policies and not looking at the underlying premise root from where those policies come. Those beachheads that have been established, fossil fuel depletion, CO2 demonization, and climate change emergency, if you leave those beachheads untouched, they launch their next attack. Let's talk about the merits of LTNs. Okay, but could we have half of the discussion on why we're getting them? What is the underlying premise? And there's not enough attack on the beachhead from where all of this is spawned. And if you attack that beachhead, you might stop 100 other policies of a different names coming shortly. But a lot of the people that we speak to, including people at community councils, they want to talk about the merits of the arrangement of the chairs on the Titanic as it goes down. And we'll have a robust debate. Let's make sure it's fair. Let's think about the colour and who's on what side. And you think, really? Where is this coming from? Oh, let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about LT. Should the signs be green? What height? And you think there's such small details. But again, if you connect with people, they trust you, and you can have these conversations. But the punchline for me of this whole talk is trying to encourage a challenge on the underlying premise. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. But that's already seeded, and I think most of the people in the room know that these underlying premises they're not unchallengeable, and they are the root of all of these things we're battling with. And they're starting to crumble. And as we begin to think, actually it could be questionable, other people will start thinking the same, and we will get that change. Because once the roots go, all of these other things that spawn from there, they just die off because they've got no root supporting them.
Let's make a leaflet. We need CO2, otherwise all the vegetation dies off. The climate change is not due by the CO2. Let's do these main points and pull them in, inform the public all over. so it goes into the head because it's very, very difficult. The propaganda has been so hard.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. So that's where we need to kind of point to. And then, like you say, once that is done, it destroys the whole concept of 20 minutes neighborhood. Because people are really stubborn as well. It doesn't matter how much you talk about the details, like you say, they're all going to find another detail. So everybody gets drowned into blah, blah, blah. No CO2 we don't have enough. The climate change doesn't exist. The sun is shining. There's no human activity. And depopulation is no agenda for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to talk as well about geoengineering. The big elephant in the room most of the time.
Tartan.
Because if it's true what's going around on the internet, then the 50-minute cities don't matter. If the trees are dying because there's aluminium and barium and goes into the ground and it chokes the roots, trees will be dying. They don't even have to remove the CO2. And it's happening, over our heads. And what can we do about it?
I know a lot of people don't, it's just too big. I was on holiday in Jersey and I was speaking to some artists because there are all these landscape paintings, huge skies, more sky than land in the paintings. And I said, hey, where's all the chemtrails? You're doing all these landscape photography and painting. And they said, oh, well, chemtrails? And I was like, come on, sky tartan, that stuff. And they were like, oh, well, there's none of it in your paintings, none of it in your photographs. Why do we not have sunset on sky tartan? Moonrise on sky tartan? Why? And they said, well, we never used to have that. And I said, well, that's the point. So modern aviation fuel is suddenly dirtier than old fuel. You've had airports here because it's an island, mostly fly. There's boats, but there's a lot of flying. My dad used to fly there. And all these landscape painters, they never painted sky trails. But people are like, oh yeah? And you think, oh my God, it's literally above your head, it's there, and people not even seen it. And so I think one elephant at a time, I think that's a big one. It's an obvious one, and it burns God knows how much fuel.
Submitted a petition for the Scottish government 2 weeks ago, and I phoned them to see the committee to see if they received it, and they've received it, and they said they're going to go through it. So we'll see what comes out of it. But New Hampshire in the USA has done the same, just prohibiting all geoengineering, also this HARP and everything, CO2 capture, cloud seeding. But I don't see much hope in it because, but I've tried and see what happens with it.
No, good on you. There's so many things to battle, to be honest. It's exhausting. So many fronts.
There's a couple of things regarding these things. The guy that made the movie Franken Skies is coming to Edinburgh next month.
That's right, aye.
You can go and visit him and he's doing a talk on it all. So you'll find that if you look on geoengineering and stuff like that.
Talk on the 14th of March.
14th of March, aye.
And then
On the 16th of the gathering, aye, on the mountain, eh?
That's
so you
important.
get a meeting with him to see him and he'll explain all the stuff regarding what he's seen.
Go on the anti-geoengineering Scotland.
Aye, that's right, aye.
Information's all there.
I mean, a couple of other things regarding geoengineering. I actually wrote to my MP probably 5 years ago, and she, I said, what's going on in the skies? Can you explain who's doing this and blah, blah, blah. And she basically just said, I know nothing about that. You'll need to write to Westminster MPs for that. Which was really interesting. And then the only other thing I would suggest that regarding the vaccines, I know it's an old story now, but I think that's the easiest way to get into people. Because not just in the last 2 weeks, I've spoken to a couple of folk that one guy had a massive heart attack, had to get open heart surgery. I spoke to him about it, and he did think it was a vaccine injury. His doctor said no, and I said, well, I'll send you information to get in touch with the vaccine injury group in Scotland. So he was quite happy and excited about that. 2 days later, his wife came into my shop and she was just looking at things and started talking as well. And she says, well, I had a stroke as well. And I says, well, there you go. I says, you get involved. Now, these two people are now getting into our side, and that way they'll start looking into all the other things.
Yeah.
So that's and it's the easiest way to get into people now, because they're all seeing folk are cancers, strokes, this, that and the next, and everybody's seeing that now. So that's the way to get into them, rather than like everybody, we all know chemtrails, and there's so many things we can talk about. As you're saying, people just drown in that information. Start with the vaccines, because everybody knows somebody now. And that programme that I've done just the last few days, there's even things on that you could say, look at that, there's the government that were hiding things, and government never done this. And that, I think, is the way to get them now, because it then builds up. For chemtrails is another thing, and all the other stuff.
But you can move on to those other... When a big enough penny drops, because you think it cannot possibly be,
Well,
oh my
once
God,
they've
it is.
been-
What else could possibly be?
But once they've got there, they can get in through the vaccine damages. Then you can then say, well, this happens and this, well, even Agenda 2030 and all this stuff. WEF, WHO and May voting for taking complete control of everybody and all that stuff. That's too much in one thing.
It is.
You just do one wee bit, and the vaccine is probably the way to do it now, because everyone knows something about that.
Man at the back.
Thanks for your speech tonight. It's been wonderful to listen to all the information that you've provided. First of all, I'd like to say there is enough money to stop poverty, and there's enough money to stop poverty tomorrow. What we don't have is enough money to satisfy the already rich. BP just recorded profits not seen for over 115 years.
Wow.
Record energy bills. We're all paying them. They're all making us poor. If you think your government's acting fraudulently, it's your duty as a citizen to stop paying taxes. And if you need verification for that, just go on to the Fraud Act of 2006, and it clearly states, if you knowingly fund or finance fraudulent activities in any shape or form, you are acting as a criminal. So there's your get out clause, right? Use it. It's there to protect you, right? All the acts and statutes are there to protect the people. Unfortunately, the government are turning it around and using them to enslave us.
Part of the confidence game war. Do you have the confidence to do what you know you could do or should do? And that's for me, that's the essence of what we're in, is a confidence game war. They know what they're doing, and I suspect they can't believe how easy they've had it. You know, and that must cause them to have so little respect for us. No wonder they call us cattle, because they're having it so easy. But maybe not for long. You know, I think there's lots of people and there's lots of understanding, and I do believe that these conversations are worth it, because it spills out and it goes out on the kind of subtle wires, and other people will ponder these things and get the confidence to, you know, to do what they need to do and not do what they shouldn't do. And I think change will come. But we probably have to keep going with these kind of conversations, hone our craft, work out what we know for sure, and through vaccine understandings or chemtrails or you know, the fraud of taxation and all these other things, any one of them, if you wake up to one of them, you're awake in general and starting to question, and then you're really on your feet, and then we're off to the races, you know. And I think we're getting there. I do.
The duties of the duties and the liabilities of the people of the county are the duties and the liabilities of the council of that county. And that's written down in the Local Government Act of 1888, paragraph 79, section 2. So, tomorrow, write an email and ask the council what their duties and liabilities are to the people. It's your right to. Now, that's the best thing about the British Constitution. It's not written on one specific document. We can go back to King Harold and use his acts because they haven't been repealed. Okay, so we can go back over 1,000 years and bring up acts and statutes and superior statutes, which, may I add, are the only ones that us as human beings need to abide by. No loss, no harm, and no injury. If you look at the Government Act of 1907, which is in the Council Handbook, it classes us as a person, and then it gives a definition of a person. Associations, businesses, corporations. So you ask them, what heading do I come under as a person? Because it says that the person, which is apparently meant to be me, I'm not an association, I'm not a corporation, I'm not a company, I'm not a business, I'm a human being. And we need to get back to our superior statutes, which are our human rights, the law of the land. Also in that act, it mentions the law of the sea, naval merchant laws, which is fraudulent. Okay? We've got nothing to do with the law of the seas. We stand under common law of the land, and that can never be taken away from you. And that's enshrined in statutes. Nobody has the authority to supersede our alienated human rights. No one. No government, no kings, no one. And our ancestors paid 1/15 in movables to bail out a king hundreds of years ago. And we were given the rights to have to not pay tax. But now tax is being brought in legislation. So, okay, there is an act out there. They can only deduct income tax if you've given them permission. Okay, now, would anyone who's given the council permission please put their hands up? Okay, right. So none of us have given permission to have any wage deductions, and yet they still do it. Okay, it's maybe one that's fighting the system, but when you put small ripples out there, those ripples will grow. And we all need to turn around tomorrow and say, I'm not paying any more council tax. I've had enough. I'm sick and tired of the way you're treating us. The utilities used to be ours until Margaret Thatcher privatised them. Did any of you give her consent to do that? No. So they've been fraudulently taken off the people. Okay? Record-breaking energy profits this year. Just go and look on any search engine and you'll see that. You know? Yep. It's hundreds of millions of pounds in profits. And we 2 years ago, we were told to take the jab to save Granny. Now it's Granny has to either eat or heat. That's it, you know. So why is this suddenly changed from protecting Granny to not giving any consideration to the elderly?
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.